Dawn over West Java. Mist settles on rice terraces as a rooster calls and the first light touches distant mountains.
In a small village called Singajaya, girls in white school uniforms walk narrow paths between the paddies to class.
Three teenage girls call it Baceprot. It means noisy. Meet Marsya on vocals and guitar, Widi on bass, and Sitti on drums. Together they are Voice of Baceprot. Indonesia, Java, West Java, Garut. And here, the small village of Singajaya, where three friends first plugged in. It was 2014. They were still students, restless and inseparable, long before anyone called them a band. This was not built by a record label or a marketing plan. It began in a schoolyard, between classes. Three friends turned boredom and frustration into something loud enough that the whole village could not ignore it. Before dawn, Marsya was already awake, reciting the Quran, then walking an hour through the fields to school. Mornings meant Islamic school. Afternoons meant regular classes. Evenings meant Quran lessons that stretched on until 9 at night. The days were long, structured, and demanding, filled with rules the girls were expected to follow without question. Somewhere in that routine, restlessness built. Fingers tapped desks. Voices rose too loud in the back of the classroom. Teachers noticed. Notebooks filled with sharp opinions instead of homework. The girls were sent, again, to the counselor's office. But that office was never really a punishment. For three loud, curious teenagers, it was about to become a door. Their counselor, Sep Ursa Eka Susila Satya, known to them as Abba Ursa, saw something the school did not. He noticed three girls who were not troublemakers so much as unused energy, looking for somewhere to go. In a small school music room, he handed Marsya a guitar, Widi a bass, and Sitti a makeshift drum kit. None of them had played before. They learned by watching, by failing, by trying again the next afternoon. Someone had finally looked at their restlessness and seen not a problem, but the beginning of something real. One afternoon, on a shared school computer, they heard a wall of distorted guitar unlike anything they knew. It was fast, heavy, and furious, a sound built entirely from tension, finally allowed to break loose. Marsya's eyes went wide. This was not background noise. This was a language she had been missing her whole life. They did not just discover a new genre of music. That afternoon, in that small computer room, they discovered a language for frustration, for pressure, for injustice, and finally, for release. From that day on, three girls who once felt unheard had found the sound that could carry their voice. They began performing covers at school events, three girls in hijabs, playing louder than anyone expected. Someone filmed a performance on a shaky phone camera and uploaded it over painfully slow village internet. The video found its way past Singajaya, past Garut, and into feeds far beyond anything they had imagined. Their original song, The Enemy of Earth Is You, became the moment everything changed, watched again and again online. A small performance in a small school had become almost overnight, a shockwave moving through the internet. Not everyone welcomed what they saw. To some, heavy metal seemed loud, aggressive, and simply wrong for young women. Comments filled their videos, questioning how girls in hijabs could play a music some saw as dangerous or improper. At home, in their own village, there were difficult conversations, disapproving looks, and pressure to reconsider their choice. This was not a story of Indonesia against metal, or Islam against music. It was more complicated than that. It was about 3 young women negotiating who got to define their faith, their bodies, and their art. And it was not only criticism. Neighbors, family members, and strangers online also began to speak up in support. Voice of Baceprot kept playing, not to prove anyone wrong, but because the music was already theirs to keep. Their lyrics grew sharper. Gender equality, freedom of expression, the right to be heard without apology. They sang about environmental destruction, about the pressure of an education system that left no room to breathe. Sang about the prefecture city. They sang about corruption, about being judged for how they looked before anyone heard a single note they played. In not public property, the message became impossible to misread or soften into something smaller. My body is not public property. My faith is not your stereotype. My voice is not your permission. This was not shock for its own sake. This was 3 women refusing to shrink for anyone's comfort. From Singajaya, lines began stretching outward across the map, toward stages the girls had never dared imagine. In 2022, they played Wacken Open Air in Germany, one of the largest metal festivals on Earth. Rage Against the Machine's Tom Morello said he watched their video again and again, stunned by what he heard. International tours followed, along with major media attention that reached far beyond the world of heavy metal. In 2024, Voice of Baceprot became the first Indonesian band ever to perform at Glastonbury Festival. Voice of Baceprot matters for reasons that reach far beyond metal music, or even music itself. They complicate the easy assumption that hijab and heavy metal, faith and rebellion cannot exist in the same person. They show that young people from a rural village can become voices heard on the world's biggest stages. They prove that the internet can carry art from the edges of attention all the way to the center. Protest does not always sound like a slogan or look like a political rally in the street. Sometimes it sounds like a bass line, a drum fill, and a voice that refuses to make itself smaller. 3 friends from Garut turned that refusal into a career and turned noise into something worth hearing. Back in Singajaya, the rice fields remain, but now stage light and sound seem to linger in the air. A young girl watches a performance on a phone screen, then picks up an old guitar left leaning nearby. Voice of Baceprot began as noise. But noise is only unwanted sound until someone understands what it means to say.